Hi there, Lemus here. Today I will try to do some server-side rendering of some JSX files using only Bun as a JavaScript runtime. So for this I will be using Kate Editor. So you can see here I'm using Kate, this version right here. Nothing special about this version, but that's the code editor I will be using for this example. And I'm also using Van in the latest version available, I believe. Let's check. Van upgrade. Okay, that's the latest version. And what are we going to do is starting from a fully empty folder, I'm going to create a couple of files, JavaScript files, and also a JSX file, and we can try to render that JSX page or component to a string and output that string to the console just to have a proof of concept of the capabilities and how simple can actually be create our own server-side rendering logic. So let's dive in. All right. I guess that the first thing we need to do is to create the file or files that we're going to be needing for this uh, tutorial today. So I will have two files. One will be the main file that we are going to use to run directly through the command line bun tooling, and that will be main. So let's create that file, touch main.js, and we'll be also creating let's say homepage JSX. Okay, simple as that. I will refresh here so I can open those files directly in Kate Editor. So let's start with the homepage. This will be something very simple. Let's export a function, no parameters so far for this example, and we're going to only return a very simple HTML structure. Nothing too fancy here, just a very basic bare page. Let's put a head section here with a title. Okay, title. Let's close the tag. This will be home page and only that. And let's do something about the body of the HTML. Okay, and inside we're going to have a simple enough header. Welcome or something like that, and a very short paragraph. This is the home page. Simple as that. We can save this, and we have a simple enough page to showcase the example we're going to be working on today. And in the main.js file, we are going to import, of course, that page or component that we have already created. Home, yeah, that's the thing. And we're going to be converting that component into a string version of the HTML file. Okay, but first I want to show something interesting here that comes with the ban runtime built in already, and we can simple enough do this console log this homepage component here, and by only doing this we can right now execute this and ban is going to do some magic there, and will create the stringify version of the JSX component. But sadly enough, I don't know how to like reuse that logic, that internal logic that ban already has included. So we need to do the rendering logic by ourselves, and having something like this as the result would be the goal in this tutorial. Of course, we are not going to add any coloring to the output, and I don't think that we're going to also be trying to format the HTML properly. We're only going to generate the string as a continuous continued I don't know, all the characters together in one simple line probably, but we're going to have something like this built manually. Okay, so we need some sort of function here that will take the element, the JSX element component as a parameter, and will be returning a properly rendered HTML string. So in this case, let's say this is going to be, I don't know, renderer, just to name it somehow, and it will be getting the JSX component or element here as an input. So all we need to do is returning a string. So let's do the default case here. In the end, if we are not able to do something explicit about the JSX element, we'll be returning an empty string, and just to have some sort of feedback in that case, we can warn that an unsupported element was unsupported element, simple as that. And let's say, what was it? Okay, we can do some JSON stringify the given unsupported element, just to have some sort of feedback if we find ourselves in the case that we didn't handle properly the JSX component. But the very minimum handling that we need to do is, if there is nothing there, let's return an empty string as something like normal. That can happen. The JSX can be null or undefined, or even an empty string. So we're going to return an empty string. We can also have a string passed here. If type of JSX is a string, then we will just return in that value. Okay, we can also have, I guess we can have numbers, and so any kind of native data type, but I'm not going to dive into that right now, because in the example we don't have anything too fancy here, and this is just to do a proof of concept implementation that can be, of course, very much extended and upgraded to handle very specific corner cases. But in this case, only handling the string, and it can also be an array, because sometimes, like in this case, body here has two different elements, and this will be given as an array of children nodes. So we need to handle that case. Array is array. So if it is an array, we're going to do something like this. We're going to call the same renderer function for any and every of the elements in the array, and we'll need to concatenate every output together. So it will be something like this. JSX is an array in this case, and we're going to map every node in that array, and we'll be just returning what the renderer function is able to do about it. And once we have that complete list of rendered strings, we can join all of them, and in this case with an empty string would be good enough, because it doesn't matter if the whole list is one and only one line of characters. It doesn't matter for the HTML interpreter in the browser, so it's okay if we join all of them only using an empty string. And we have one extra case to handle here, because JSX can be an object, and that is going to be like the most interesting case. So if it is actually an object, then here we're going to do a bit more things. Right now I need to double check what information is coming by default when ban like converts the JSX into an internal representation, because I do not remember the structure. So far we're going to do something like this. Let's log out that object to see the keys and values that it contains, and we are going to return object in this case, just to have something in the output, or not object, but something like this would be like a pseudo HTML representation of that object so far. So if we run this, yeah, this is silly me. I have to remove this, and let's do the conversion. We will have a page variable that would be the result of rendering. No, renderer the home page, and this is what we want to print out to the console page. Okay, now let's try again. Okay, we can see the object output here, but before that we can see that we are receiving an object that includes a type, a key, and another object called with the key being props, and inside that props we have the children. Okay, the children, some other information like owner, store, and things that we really don't care right now. So basically we need to extract the type that is going to give us the tag, and we need to extract from the props the children, and everything else would be like the attributes to be aware of for that HTML tag element. So let's do that. Like we can come here and say, hey, I need to extract the children, not the children, the key from here. Not the key, the type. My mistake. The type, and from props, we are going to extract children. That is, I guess it will always be a valid key there, and everything else will be the attributes for that tag HTML tag element from JSX. Okay, so I'm guessing that something is wrong here. What is wrong here? What is this? What is wrong here? I don't see what is the matter here. Okay, let's see props. Am I doing this wrong? Or maybe, yeah, I need to be explicit about what key I'm going to use to extract from. Okay, so we have type, children, attributes. Never used. Children is also never used. I don't know why it's not highlighting that, but it doesn't matter. Okay, we have the type, and the type will give us the tag, in this case. Okay, type here. This needs to be a template. Okay. Now, this is not completely correct what I'm doing right now, because I am assuming that the type and the tag in this case is always going to be a non-self-closing tag. But right now, in our example, all of them are explicitly closed tags. So it's not going to do anything wrong. But eventually, it is a good practice to have like an array of values or expected tags that we know that are going to be self-closing tags, so we can decide if we're going to use this template or only one opening tag with a self-closing pattern there. But in this case, this is the more general approach, and that's the one I'm going to use right now. So we also need to render attributes here and render children here. But the children is basically only calling the renderer function and pass the children there. It's going to handle everything and every single one of them if there are more than one, because we are already doing that in the renderer logic. And we need to render the attributes. And in this case, I think it would be cleaner to have a function to render the attributes alone. In this case, I'm not going to do anything with it right now because I don't have any attributes in the piece of JSX that we have already in this home file, but we're going to leave it there as a future reference. And also, all we need to do is, I don't know, put the response here. Yeah, as simple as that. Render attributes. Okay, I think that would be basically it. Let's see how it goes. Save and clear the screen. Okay, now we see HTML head, title with the home page, closing title, closing head, open body, the h1 header, the paragraph, and the closing body and the closing HTML. So it is properly working. Now let's do something with this portion here that is trying to render the attributes. And for that, we're going to do something here. Let's add the lang attribute here, English. Yeah, I think this one is simple enough for what we want to do right now. Save it. If we rerun this, of course, we are not seeing any attribute here because we need to handle that. And what we're going to do is check first what is getting into this function. Maybe, yeah, attributes is going to be an object, so let's stringify it. that to have a proper look at the contents of that object. Okay, we see most of the time the attributes are empty for every one of these other cases. Head is empty, title is empty, body is empty, h1p, every one of them is an empty object, so no keys to handle. But in the case of the HTML, we're getting the line key with the end value. So basically the most simple way, or the simplest way to do this is taking all the keys, and for every key value of the object, let's print the key following an equal sign and a string representation of the value. Okay, let's do that right now. Simple enough. Let's get rid of this. And we can do this in one line, I think. It will be enough. Right here, we can say, hey, take up all the entries here and let's map every entry with let's take the key in this case, or key, and let's take the value also, key value from the entry. I think this is okay. I'm having my doubts right now. I think maybe it's this way or from an array. I'm not sure what entries returns. Returns an array of key values of the enumerable property of an object. Okay. A string array. No, is returns an array, a string, any. So an array of arrays. So we need to get the key and the value from an array. Oh, I don't know why I. Okay, and we're going to return the key and equals and the value as a string in this case. We can double check that we are converting it. Double check now, make sure that we're converting the value. And once we have all of that key value pairs converted into string, we're going to concatenate all of those values using a space, a space between them. That's how HTML usually handles attributes, and that's what are we going to do. Okay, we can see that right now there is an issue here that we are appending the attributes right next to the tag, and that is wrong. We need to leave some space there. That can be handled here. We can say easily rendered attributes is going to be this rendered attributes function output, and we need to say that we're going to put here if rendered attributes has something, we will place a space, and then I think best not to nest the template in string, so let's do something simpler. this and the render attributes. And if there is nothing there, we will simply leave it empty. Okay. Now we see the tag and a space and then the attributes. And that will be a very basic approach to have somehow proper server-side rendering logic that can be, of course, extended, improved, and adapted to any particular situation. But right now, it covers the very basics and is something that can be easily achieved without requiring any third-party libraries or full-fledged frameworks to solve that. We can even extend this into TypeScript realm because at some point we, at least I prefer to have actual types and type checking to be certain that everything is being called with the proper parameters and I'm accessing the proper properties in objects, and it is always I don't know, more convenient having TypeScript enabled and fully working. But this was just to showcase how trivial can be doing some server-side rendering uh, manually, and it's going to be like a fun experience. I guess that it takes away some mysticism and mystery from how React, and any other library alike is trying to do this some way or another. And in my case, I prefer this rendering being in the server and instead of the client. And React, and all of them uh, are were born specifically for the client, and somehow they implemented back the client rendering to the server when the server-side rendering was becoming more popular. But we can see that ban is always a solid alternative, and it has quite a few interesting built-in features that help a lot to simplify development and require less and less and less of third-party libraries to solve common problems. So I hope this was a I don't know useful tutorial. If you guys have anything that can help me to improve, or tips, or showing me another way of doing this and maybe a better or more industry appropriate standard, I will be reading any and every feedback in the comments. Thanks and bye bye.